So with that, let me introduce to you the man that everybody knows, the wonderful Kevin Wheeler. Good morning, Kevin.
Good morning, Lucy, and everybody.
Wonderful. So, Kevin, where are you? You're not in San Fran today. Where are you dialing in from?
I'm in Thailand, and it's 7 o'clock in the morning here.
Wonderful. Excellent. And just another location to add to the list. I can see everybody telling us in the chat where they're dialing in from. So let's add Thailand to that list. So everyone knows we're dialing in today for Kevin's Fearless Forecast presentation. This is a presentation that Kevin delivers every year, and it's always a highlight at our ATC events that we hold, our annual conference. Kevin originally delivered this presentation today at the conference that we held in November at Luna Park. Was anybody on the line live at the presentation? Were you in the room listening to it and just jumping back online to pick up any final words of wisdom from Kevin to make sure you get every last crumb? But if not, we always think this is a really valuable way to start the year. Kevin's always got great insights to share, great knowledge for the year ahead to help everybody plan and strategize. But Kevin, I have noticed you've changed the title of this talk a little bit from Fearless Forecast to Phoenix or Dodo. Why was that?
Actually, last year in my presentation, about 3 slides in, I had Phoenix or Dodo. I just moved it up to the front this time because I think we're in such a transitional point in recruiting that if we continue just to do things the way we've always done them, we're going to go the way of the dodo bird. And I think we need to reinvent ourselves like the Phoenix and create something completely new and different. And that's kind of why I changed the title.
Right, there we go, reinvention. Okay, word of the year for TA. Well, on that note, if anybody has any questions during Kevin's presentation, drop them into the chat. We can either pick them up throughout the presentation, or we will make sure to have some time for Q&A at the very end. But with that, Kevin, I will hand over to you.
All right, thank you. Okay. All right, let's see if I can go bigger screen. Can I do that? No, that's all right. All right, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome. This is a slightly different than the one I did at Luna Park in Sydney because the world has moved on and changed. But it's mostly the same. But there's a few things that I think have changed enough that I needed to make a few additions to the presentation. So you'll see a little differences if you remember from Luna Park. But basically, I think our profession and the whole world actually is in turmoil right now. Everything is changing. There's a lot of reasons for it, but obviously primarily driven by AI and the large language models and generative AI that's come out, but also lots of other things. What's going on in the Middle East and Israel, the wars, which are really having an impact economically on us all in May. We don't know how much it's going to play out in the end. There's also all sorts of issues in the economy. China's not doing as well as it was. Parts of Europe aren't doing well. Other parts of the world are booming. So it's a really uncertain sort of future. And I think it's an uncertain future for recruiting. So we're really going to have to be flexible and agile and adjust ourselves. And I think the next few years, we're going to have to, really think about how do we build new systems and new ways of doing recruiting. How do we what are the new skills that we're going to need? And I'll talk a bit about that. And what's our charter? What's our vision or our future going to look like? And those are things we're going to have to really explore as we move further into this decade for sure. So I think this is just the beginning of a 10-year process of change and development. But just to step back a bit to 2023, take a look at what was going on in 2023. Lots of things were different. ChatGPT and the large language models sort of appeared out of almost nowhere. And in 2022, I mentioned in my Fearless Forecast that look out because generative AI is coming. But I had no idea that it would be as incredibly powerful as it is. And I don't think any of us did or anyone did. So it has really changed everything tremendously, obviously, as we know. There's been layoffs in the tech sector, particularly, probably primarily due to the overhiring that was done during the pandemic. And we'll explore that a little bit in a minute. But it's been devastating, especially for recruiters in the high-tech space in the US. And I think that's true maybe to a lesser degree elsewhere around the world. But there's been a lot of changes in recruiting, and I'll explore a little bit more about what I think is going on there. But so 2023 was sort of the kickoff year for that. And I think a whole new set of skills that are being challenged and readjusting to the pandemic. So corporate world's facing a new reality. Lots of corporations, many CEOs are coming out now and saying, we really overhired during the pandemic. We didn't anticipate what was really going to go on. We really didn't appreciate the impact that the pandemic was going to have on our business. We still have demographics challenges. Most of the world is suffering from a low birth rate, which means an aging population. And while that isn't going to impact recruiting this year or next year or 3 years from now, it's over time, it's going to have a huge impact on the available workforce, which is going to be older, and it's going to be harder to find the younger workforce, which is not going to be there. Okay, we're going to really have to understand the skill shortage we have. And talent is becoming more and more concentrated in a few spots. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. Talk a little bit about that. So if we look at remote work, remote work is something that everybody was either forced to do during the pandemic, and many loved it and want it to remain there. But there's an incredible amount of pressure right now everywhere in the world to come back to the office. The number of businesses allowing people to work remotely has gone down, as you can see here, from almost 30% to about 16%. A huge drop in that. And that is pretty significant if you're one of those people that like to work remotely, and you've made your lifestyle a remote working style. Unless you are independent, work as a consultant or a gig worker, it's probably going to be really hard to maintain, because I think more and more companies are going to ask you to come back to the office and stay in the office. And only about 11% of companies are completely remote right now. And those are companies that were probably remote even before the pandemic for some unique reason, the way their businesses work, they can be and almost maybe need to be remote. But I look here in the US at Amazon, I look at Salesforce, Google, they're all actively coercing their employees back, saying that your performance appraisal will be affected if you don't come back to work, that your bonus will not be as big if you don't come back to work. So, I mean, there's some real coercion going on to get you to come back to the office. And for recruiters, it's just about universal to come back, unless you are an independent, recruiter, work for an agency, or have your own business. But other than that, recruiters are on the first bunch to be asked to come back in person. So a really different world now than a lot of us that got used to working remotely may not be able to. If we actually look at who works from home, it's changing quite a bit from 2019 to today. That blue line, which was 2019, showed a pretty broad distribution of people that could work from home. But if you look at the red line, which is today, the only people who can work from home are really the most highly paid professionals, white-collar professionals whose work is very conducive to that, something like a financial planner or a marketeer, somebody whose work is almost always done independently or just occasionally with a team or small group of people. So the number of people that are being allowed to work from home is really going down, and those who do earn a lot of money, which is interesting. So if you don't earn about 150,000 US dollars a year, you're probably not going to be able to work from home, which is kind of a really interesting statistic that when I saw this chart, it was really surprising to me about that. And if we look at, I mentioned earlier that talent is concentrating in a very few places. And I think what's really fascinating to me is a few places are becoming what they call super hubs, which are these places like London, which is, everybody who's got a highly valuable skill wants to be in one of these hubs, one of these places. And you're finding a lot of migration amongst people relocating and moving into these cities like the San Francisco Bay Area, which isn't a super hub, but it's an important hub for the tech industry. If you work in that industry, more and more you're going to be asked to come and live and work in San Francisco. So if you're looking for tech talent, if you're looking for financial talent, Dubai or London, we know already where talent is located, sort of, and that's becoming more and more the case. So to find somebody that wants to work in, Brisbane, for example, or somebody who wants to work in one of these cities that are not a hub, is probably going to be more of a challenge if your business requires the kind of talent that likes to be in these hubs, especially if you don't allow remote work. So it's companies are relocating headquarters. They're moving, opening satellite offices in these hub cities for that reason. So just interesting things going on, that have nothing to do with ChatGPT or AI, but just around the economy, around lifestyle, and around how organizations are thinking about the future of work, which is, I think, pretty interesting when we think about this. So I think we have to think broader than just about technology, which is critical, and I'm going to talk a lot about that in a minute. But there's a lot of other things that are impacting what we do as a profession, and how we recruit, and who we recruit, and where those people are located. And I think we really need to more completely understand that. The talent intelligence to understand what's going on and where they are. I mentioned earlier that there were tons of layoffs, and we've had just literally, I think the figure right now is over 100,000 tech workers were laid off in the San Francisco Bay Area. It's had a significant impact on lots and lots of people, especially recruiters. But if we look at the amount of hiring that took place during the pandemic, it's almost shocking. This top graph, the blue bar, is Amazon's hiring during the pandemic. They have about 1.5 million employees around the world. And they've laid off a small percentage here, a very tiny percentage. And if you look at the right at that graph, that's the kind of change it's made. Nothing, basically, a little blip, a little tiny drop in the number. So these massive layoffs we're hearing, they are huge, and they impact a lot of people's lives negatively. But in terms of the total employment in these companies, it's very, very tiny impact. So when you hear that Microsoft's laying off 10% of its workforce, it's 10% of a vast workforce. And it's probably, again, focused, unfortunately, on recruiters and on those things that can be automated. So what we're really seeing is that Microsoft, IBM, and several others have come out publicly and said that we're laying off basically what I would call entry to mid-level people, and we're not going to ever replace them. We're just going to use AI to do what they do. So this is going to be, again, this is going to have a significant impact on recruiting and obviously unemployment. And I'm not sure how this is going to shake out over the long run. But as we get into talking more about AI, we'll see that there's some warning bells ringing or lights flashing for a lot of people in different jobs that they're in. So let's just dive into the 2024 and what I think may be happening out there this year. Some of it has already started to happen. But I think the first thing is obviously artificial intelligence, large language models, generative AI is going to be the dominant trend of this year and probably of this decade. I think there's absolutely no doubt about that. It's a given. Things like the internet and other things had a much more gradual uptake. Even social media took years to really become a dominant force. And I can remember talking in my predictions probably 10 or 15 years ago in Australia about that LinkedIn and Facebook would be really important. And many people in Australia said, nah, never going to use Facebook. No way. And even LinkedIn was questioned. And look at it today. We pretty much can't live without either one of those, or TikTok or one of the other social media. So, but that took a decade or more to become dominant. Now we're doing these things in a matter of weeks, in some cases hours. Things are changing, and the adoption is widespread and universal. So just about everybody I know is using ChatGTP, either the free one or the paid one, and many are using the paid version. Many companies are already creating their own large language model, an internal one based on their own data. I was just with a company in Singapore, huge company in Southeast Asia, 2 days ago, and they've developed their own large language model. They don't use the generic one. They have their own version of this that they're developed based on their own data, their own data set. So these are going to transform our industry totally. They're already, augmenting or automating just about everything, or they can automate or augment or automate almost everything if we allow them to do so. And as I said, there'll be resistance, and many of us in recruiting are going to push back on these. But I think we're going to have a really hard time to stop them from taking over many of these processes. And we'll talk a little more about that. So this is like the dominant trend. If we just take a look at this graph, which I think is sort of interesting, we say, is this overhyped? Are we really just going kind of crazy with AI and large language models? And I don't think we are. Again, as I said earlier, the internet took years. This is the penetration graph, that big green black graph up there. That was the penetration graph of the internet. It took decades before everybody pretty much was comfortable and had access to the internet. Large language models are way down there at the very beginning. I mean, we hardly even exist yet. And with the rapid rate of adoption, we're going to be where the internet is today. We're going to be there in a matter of months, probably. So the adoption rate is just incredible. And I think the hardest challenge for us and for anybody out there in the world, anybody in the world today, is being able to learn about it and live with it and become comfortable with it. And that's really going to be our challenge in recruiting, is how do we use it? Where do we use it? What's ethical? What's right? What's wrong? What's legal? And these are all questions that are already being raised everywhere that I go. And nobody really has good answers yet. As I mentioned earlier, job and wage growth, I think, are going to slow. So I think my point here is that the demand for recruiting is going to remain fairly soft to negative this year, I believe. In some industries, that will not be the case. I think in healthcare, it's going to be a growth market with hiring more recruiters. It looks like hospitality and travel are going to be growth industries. But a lot of other industries, especially tech and others, I think are going to remain fairly soft. They're going to be hiring. They're going to be hiring key talent. As the CEO of Alphabet, Google, said a couple of weeks ago, he said, we're definitely hiring AI and related areas aggressively, but we're not hiring recruiters, HR, et cetera, and we're not going to hire them ever again because we're going to use more automation to do this. So the messages are filtering out. And what I try to do in my work is to identify these early little messages that you may not pay much attention to and say, what might this mean as it snowballs and grows? So I think we'll see slower hiring this year. I'm not really sure if that's going to be true in Australia, but I think it's definitely going to be true elsewhere in the world, and probably in Australia as well. Inflation is still going to continue to go down, but it's not going to mean wages are going to go up, and wages are going to stay pretty stagnant, I think, this year. There's already pushback from many economists that we already have paid people too much, and we need to cut back on that. So salaries are going to be under pressure, and that's going to help to lower inflation. But it doesn't mean it's great if you're looking for a wage increase. Okay. I think the gig economy is going to remain very critical. And those companies that say they're not going to hire people back are probably going to, almost for sure, are going to hire back consultants, contractors, and temporary workers when they need them. So it's all this whole move toward a more sustainable recruiting model, which is what I'm hearing everywhere. How do we have a model that's sustainable and agile and flexible? And the way they're going to do that is to have a smaller core of permanent people and a big core surrounding them of contingent and gig workers. I don't think there's anything new in this. This is a model that's been around since the 1970s, but it hasn't ever been super widely adopted and totally agreed upon by everybody. But I think we're moving into an age where this is normal. And it's going to be driven not only by the need for flexibility and agility to deal with uncertain economics, it's also going to be because we're having a hard time finding the people we need. We're aging workforce, the demographics, and the attitudes of the younger generation. And they're pushing back pretty heavily on the traditional employment that most of us probably have accepted as normal and what we want. They're saying they don't want that. They want flexibility. They want to work in a more hybrid world. And we're going to see how this plays out, given the pressure I mentioned earlier of CEOs that are my age saying, come back to the office. So there's going to be a lot of friction over the next couple of years as we work through some of these issues and decide how we're going to deal with these situations. So a lot of really interesting stuff going on out there. The circular supply chain, and I use this instead of internal mobility, I call it a circular supply chain because I think it better defines what we mean when we say internal mobility. And this means we need to repurpose and reuse the talent that we already have. So we continue to circulate it and recirculate it within the company. Rather than always jumping outside, we find those inside and give them the skills and the experiences so they can do different work. I think it's a cost-effective approach. It's far cheaper than recruiting. Recruiting is a very expensive process when you look at the fully loaded costs of recruiter salaries and the technology, equipment, and so forth. It's much more effective to use internal talent and retrain it. It also fits right in line with this whole sustainable economy, reuse, repurpose, recycle. So if we can repurpose and recycle people, it's far better than going outside and trying to bring in the brand new stuff. So this is a mindset that's, I think, going to take place this year in a bigger and more significant way than it has in the past. And it's also a way that recruiters can become more valuable and repurpose what they do into helping make this happen. And I'll talk about that in a little bit more in a minute. So I think this is something to really think about. And I think using the circular supply chain is a better term than internal mobility. If we really look at what can be automated today, or potentially, I'm not saying it all will be, it just could be. So if you said, I really want to automate the heck out of recruiting, could you do it? Yes, you could. And I think you can see from this chart that a lot can be. So certain things that can only be partly automated, and that's probably a good thing. And again, those are where recruiter skills will be very valuable. But I think we have to be very realistic about what can automation do. And even though it can't do it 100% or as well as we do it, there's this thing called the 80-20 rule. And when something can do 80% as well as you do, it almost always takes over doing what you did. So the early automobile could do 80% of what a horse could do, and the horse died, went out of business. So I mean, this is a trend that this has been historically tracked over many different things, from the use of the automobile to the implementation of airplanes and everything else over the railroad. So I think you have to say, even though it's not as good as you, and you can definitely do it better, that doesn't mean they're going to keep you to do it. And I think that's a lesson we really have to wake up to and be well aware of. Okay. The next one is recruiter productivity will increase this year. It has to increase this year if we're going to continue to be a viable profession. And when I say productivity, I define it very simply as how many requisitions can you deal with full engagement and full quality, not just throwing anybody at a hiring manager. So I think the only way you're going to be able to increase productivity is by using automation and tools to help you. If you can use automation to help create job descriptions, to post jobs, to screen candidates, to do so much of the administrative work, schedule interviews and these things, if you can move most interviews to the hiring manager instead of from you, and you use technology to do the initial screening, can save you tons of time and free you up to deal with more people in an engaging and relationship way. So I think you got to put in your head, if you're handling, let's just say you're handling 20 requisitions right now, you have to ask you, how could I handle 30? What would I have to do to handle 30? And with the same quality that I'm handling these 20, or better quality than I'm handling these 20. That's something you're going to have to really think about and ask yourself. But I think it's a 50% likely thing that this is going to be a topic this year. And I've already heard discussions about this. And the technology is going to make that possible. I think that a 4-day work week may be coming, and this is my my wild card prediction. I've got a 50% likelihood, but it might be maybe less than that. But what I see happening is this push to have people come back to the office may end up just saying, okay, let's just do a 32-hour work week. And maybe that will help to make the people who have to come back to work feel better. It's maybe a more economical way for companies to deal with this than these confusing and sometimes conflicting hybrid schedules. In fact, one of our U.S. Congress representatives has introduced a bill into our Congress proposing that non-exempt workers, meaning non-permanent, non-salaried workers, would be reduced to 32 hours a week with full pay. I don't think this is going to go anywhere given American politics, but the idea that somebody could introduce this as a potential law is pretty amazing to me. Amazon is experimenting with this already. Microsoft is in Japan. So it's not a way out there idea. I think the 4-day work week may become more and more attractive to CEOs and companies as they deal with all these issues that I've already talked about earlier in the presentation. So those are some of the key things I think we're going to be dealing with this year as recruiters, and just as human beings, just as people, we're going to have to deal with these issues. But I think the future of recruiting is not bleak at all. I think it's actually quite positive in a way that's freeing you and us up from all the administrative and tedious kinds of work that we had to do. By letting automation do that, that's the opportunity to do things I think are far more interesting and far more valuable to the organization. And one of the big reasons that recruiters get dismissed during tough economic times is they're not perceived as adding enough value. So how do I make myself more valuable? Well, you do that by, number one, increasing your productivity by using AI so that you do the work. Okay, that's number one. That's a potential saving for the organization. It's by using more analytics and data that AI can give you to make better decisions about people, to run things managers that you can use analytics to show them trends and what's happened and make better decisions. You can focus on strategies and workforce planning, which is going to be more and more critical. What kind of what should the composition be versus contractor versus permanent? These are things that you as those conversations and be a contributor to those conversations. Okay, I think marketing is going to have to become a key piece of what we do. I think marketing strategies, understanding messaging that's going to attract the right people to your organization. You can augment this and learn a ton from analytics that the automation can give you. But in the end, the strategy has to be ours in recruiting. And I think that's where we can play a really significant and differentiating role. I think we can influence and train hiring managers, and this is just going to be critical because I really do believe that within the next 3 to 4 years, hiring managers will sit at their computer and say, I need this kind of a person, and they will be presented in a really short, maybe almost instantly with 3 or 4 good candidates, because the automation has gone out there and done what we do and presented them to them. But we're going to have to coach them on how to screen those, how to interview them. So we've got a big job of training and influencing hiring managers, which is probably far more valuable than just going out there and finding those people if the technology can do that. Okay. So I think also influencing candidates and overcoming objection and dealing with all the hundreds of issues that candidates have in a personal, engaging way, rather than in the way that we don't do that today well enough. We spend so much doing finding and screening and interviewing and editing. We don't do enough nurturing. And so we really have to move into this where we nurture people, and that's where probably our big skill set in the future can be. Okay. Well, I think there's 6 big wow, this slide got really screwed up. I'm really sorry. I don't know what happened. Anyway, what I will do is I will have Lucy fix this and shoot a good one. But the skills are what we've been talking about. You have to understand AI and analytics. If you don't understand AI and analytics, you're not going to be a player in the long run. You have to get really much better than we are, most of us, at marketing, influencing, strategy. We have to remain really flexible and agile and develop and add a mindset around agility and flexibility. Really respond properly and without anger or without fear when things change. So be change adaptable and flexible instead of rigid that many of us probably are today. We'll fix this slide and get this to you. Sorry about that. In terms of what should a recruiting function look like in the future? Well, let me just preface this by saying there's probably 100 models. This is just one potential model. But as you can see here, I put marketing in this piece. And these dots do not necessarily mean a person or a separate function. They just mean things we have to focus on and do. So marketing, I think, has to be one of our very key areas that we really focus on. Under interfacing, creating the right policies, really working on that circular supply chain is going to be a big part of what we do here. Making sure that we partner with HR to have the right policies and processes in place to make that happen as seamlessly as we can. To really have analytics so that we can make better arguments and understand what we're doing better in a more real-time way. And recruiting here at the bottom in that sense, really, I think mainly recruiting will focus around the most hard to find positions, those senior level jobs, and probably graduate recruitment. I think all the other move up here to the left-hand side of this group, either outsource largely to an RPO or completely automated. And I think within the next, before this decade is over for sure, I think probably 50 to 70% of recruiting will be completely automated. Any routine, just computer will find the people or engage them enough that they want to take these jobs. And if the volume is too great or it can't happen, the RPOs, which are gaining traction and they are really developing technology today on steroids in some cases, we'll be able to take that over. So recruiting will still exist as recruiting, but for a limited subset of people. And then part of the job will be in the circular supply chain, again, development, helping employees find new opportunities, matching them up to the right opportunities by using technology and AI to help you do that. And those are going to be critical capabilities that we have. So these models are fun to look at and play with, and what you should be doing, you should take it, draw, gee, how could we change what we're doing now to make it look different, better, and live up to some of these things that I've been talking about here. I think I'm going to leave you with 6 imperatives that I think we really need to, as a profession, need to really focus on this year. The first one is our mindset. You know, we really need to change our mindset. New ideas, new practices, challenging ourselves, challenging our assumptions. These are really going to be critical things we do. As at the beginning, we need a new charter. What is that charter? What is our function? What do we do? When somebody says to you, what do you do? I'm a recruiter. Well, what does that mean? If somebody says, oh, what does a recruiter do? How would you explain that to somebody? And we'd say, oh, we just find people. Is that what you do? Or what is it? Isn't there a broader charter than that? Okay. What is your vision? What do you want to do or be? What could the function be? How do you AI, the gig workforce, the global talent market, talking about these super hubs, everything that we're talking about here. How do we make that all part of our charter and what we do? So what's your vision for the future? How are you going to craft that vision? And we have to do this with urgency. Don't have any leftover extra time, okay? Mario Andretti, a race car driver that many of you may know, he said, if everything seems under control, you're not going fast enough. And, you know, one of the things I think we all fear is that I'm out of control. I don't know what's going on for sure. And when that happens, we start to push back and we start to stop doing things. Instead of what we should be doing is accelerate it even more and move even faster. And I know it's easy to say this and hard to do, but just think, if you're starting to feel a little fearsome or frustrated, a better response than to say, I'm going to stop doing it, is to push forward and continue to do that. Take that next leap. And that's hard to do, but I think it's really important. And then experiment. We have to experiment. We have to try different technologies, different tools. You know, we're going to be inundated. We already are inundated with vendors and tools and widgets and gadgets and so forth. So we're going to have to experiment with which ones work for us in our situation, which ones are going to help us do what we do. These are, you know, probably going to be some of the most important experiments in our career as we try out different things and fail fast. You know, that's one of the key things here is experiment, but, you know, if it's not working, stop and try something else. And don't worry about that. Little experiments with control groups. Take one group of candidates and try automation with that group only. See how it works. Experiment with it. Try different approaches. I think that's really critical. And expand your network, which I think, again, is a really important thing for us to do. A bigger network than just other recruiters. I think we need to have a network with, you know, even economists or AI people. You need to get out there and understand more of the trends going on. If you're going to create a recruitment strategy, you have to have a big picture of the world. So you need to get out there and talk to different kinds of people in different fields. You need to go make, you know, partner network with people in your organization that do strategy or planning or marketing or whatever it is they do. But the more diverse people you have in your network, the better you're going to be as a recruiter in the future. There's no question about that in my mind. Really important. So it's really a time of change, of massive change and of challenge. Challenge yourself, challenge every assumption. If you think this is the only way, if I have to interview candidates, nothing can do it as well as me, challenge that and say, okay, maybe AI can do it as better than me, or use that 80-20 principle I talked about. What's your attitude? You know, my attitude is, oh, I love what I do. What I do is the right way to do it, and this technology is not the right way. That's the wrong attitude. So you got to have an attitude that accepts the future. What is our accepted way of doing things, and why can't we change it? What would happen if we stopped doing this? So we really need to just challenge everything in our organizations. And how do we structure it? How we put together that little model I showed you a minute or two ago. What's that look like for your organization? Could we actually automate some of the recruiting and give the candidates a better experience than they're getting today by being semi-neglected or taking tons of time to respond to them? So ask ourselves those questions and challenge yourself. And if there's any message I'd like to leave you with today, it's this one, these 4 points right here. I think this is what you really have to focus on for your own success, your own viability in the future, because recruiting, as we've known it, is definitely changing, and it's not going to look like this in 3, 4, 5 years from now, and maybe not even by the end of this year. So thanks very much for the thing. I'd just like to make a plug for my new book, which is just coming out. It'll be out in early February. You can order it on Amazon or a couple other places. And I talk about a lot of these things in much more depth in the book You can pre-order it now. You can also subscribe to my newsletter, which comes out every week. It's free. It's fotnews.futureoftalent.org. And I continue to explore these topics in that. So thanks so much for the day. And if there's any questions, I'm really happy to answer those. So.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for that, Kevin. I'm just, before we go into any Q&A, I'm just going to apologize to everyone for the couple of connection issues we had going back and forth. There was a period of about 3-4 minutes where there were some fuzzy slides and some breaking up audio. Just rest assured, we will be sending out a PDF version of the slides. They'll be crystal clear, and also the recording, because I think some people had different connection issues than others. So hopefully we'll be able to capture some of those really key insights that Kevin mentioned during that time. If anybody does have any questions, please share them in the chat now. We've got time for some Q&A. Kevin, we had a question come in from Paul Jacobs. He said, wondering if Kevin is aware of any trends working remotely across countries and borders. For example, living in Australia and working with a US-based team, are we seeing the emergence of a borderless model?
Yeah, it definitely it happened. It's definitely happening. I mean, like I said before, there's a real sort of paradox or conflict going on here. CEOs want people to come back to the office, but not necessarily everybody. Okay, so if you have a key technologist, a key AI player, a very key member of your team that's in New Zealand or Australia or wherever, they're definitely going to continue to employ that person and keep them on board as a remote worker. But if you are a recruiter and you say, I want to go work in New Zealand instead of in America, probably not going to happen. All right. So it's going to be the kind of jobs that are critical talent that has leverage because of what they do, that will be able to work and continue to work in those different countries. But definitely happening, definitely will continue to happen, and maybe even increase in frequency. If the person I need to hire is London and it's a critical skill, I'm going to hire them in London. What may happen is companies, if they have enough people, will open up a small office in those places. So there might be a little satellite office in Wellington or a small satellite office in London, so that you still have to go to a place of work, but you are remote, okay, in effect.
So it's probably less going to be a company by company trend and more a skills-based trend of, as you said, certain talents and certain skills are based in very concentrated in certain areas, and that might lead to models.
It'll be a skill-based trend completely.
Yep. I actually had a question about one of your earlier slides when you mentioned that AI was replacing a lot of those mid-level employees. What does that mean long term? If we're losing those mid-level employees, what does that mean for skills development and in 10 years' time? Are we going to be losing that highly skilled labor, or is that something that we're going to need to be focusing on now to develop internally that labor and skipping that mid-level? Or will that highly skilled labor be picked up by AI in 10 years' time?
Yeah, I think the two things you have to say. Number one, if trades, for example, those kind of jobs that are manual, carpenters, plumbers, anything like that, they're totally not impacted by AI. They will be fine. Okay. So all the tradies are going to be in heaven. Okay. The ones that are going to be affected are the people that I say do what I would say is largely, and I really hate to use this term, I use it with some caution, is they're largely glorified clerks. Okay. People who have a college degree and do things that are valuable. I give an example, would be a law clerk. Okay. Something like that. Lawyers depend heavily on a law clerk, but I think that for much of that work can be automated and already has been automated today. So jobs like a lot of HR jobs are really scheduling interviews, things like this. These are jobs that are easily automated or relatively easily automated and will be and are being. So like IBM laid off a whole lot of, I'd say mid to low level HR people and said they're never going to bring them back. We're going to replace them all with AI. So I think the challenge for anyone in one of those jobs is, how do I get higher level skills? How do I develop myself to have bigger, better skills? And I think the the challenge right now for all of us is we don't yet know what some of the good things are going to be, and what some of the things that we should start learning are yet. We're in this experimental phase of things. So the key right now is get the broadest skill set you can get, remain as agile and flexible as you can. If an opportunity that looks good to you comes along, accept it. Learn as much as you can from it, and don't be upset if it goes away after a while and you have to find another one. So I mean, the hardest thing is going to be this mindset of agility, flexibility, experimentation, and learning. And that's really the survival skill that we all need to have right now today. That is the ultimate survival skill. Constantly learning, constantly being curious about what's going on, networking to lots of different people, and not just staying in our little silo and crossing our fingers and hoping we'll be okay. I think that's the worst possible strategy you can have.
Yeah, great advice. And moving on from that, Paul Martin has asked a question around advancing AI technologies. How do you see the role of human intuition and emotional intelligence evolving in things like candidate selection process?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be really critical. I think a lot of that talent intelligence and data collection will be automated, obviously. It's still going to take human judgment and human understanding, nuancing of that of that information. So I think talent intelligence is going to become already is an incredibly important part of what we do as recruiters. I don't think we do it well enough at all. In fact, most people don't do it at all, really. Being able to answer the tough questions a hiring manager might have and present good data. I was just with a recruiter in Singapore, and he was saying that, he was trying to get data to present to a hiring manager because the hiring manager had these very unrealistic, obviously we all have run into this, unrealistic expectations for what they want. And he said he just, was really struggling to find the data that he needed. So this is where talent intelligence comes in and where analytics comes in. And so, I mean, it's a critical future skill. I think any company and several now that are working on providing this service to people, they're going to continue to grow and become more and more important. To be able to say, how many electrical engineers are in Sydney right now with these skill sets, being able to answer that question is going to be worth $1 million. Okay. So. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is potentially more of a comment than a question. We've got here from Shad Montgomery saying, Kevin, do you have any thoughts on large agencies with deep pockets and money for tools and resources beating smaller micro agencies with less resources that are not able to invest as much in tech tools and people resources?
Yeah. I think that is the world of the growing world of RPO, or something like RPO. I think for smaller companies, they're going to have to look for affordable external providers that have that technology, that have invested in it because they spread that cost over many clients. But for a small company, even a relatively mid-sized kind of a company, for many of them, to invest in the kinds of technology and so forth that we're talking about here with AI is probably not realistic in the short term. So this is where this is why many people call me the RPO champion, and I don't know why. I just think it's a logical progression that you would use an organization for the hiring that you have vetted it to do well and make sure it does well, because they've got the technology, they've invested in the technology, and they probably have hired the team of people that know how to use all that effectively. And it's going to be far better than hiring some recruiter off the street that's got very limited access to tools or data to try to fill the positions you have. I just think you'd be better off taking whatever salary and overhead you're going to spend for that and investing that in a good RPO. But you've got to really vet the RPO. You've got to understand what it can do and what it can't do. And not every RPO is going to be able to recruit for every position that you have. So it's about really understanding that world and making good decisions.
Wonderful. All right. Thanks, Kevin. We might actually look at finishing up now, just so everybody's got time to head off to the next meeting, a little bit of time between appointments. But Kevin, thank you so much for sharing all your insights today. As always, they're always invaluable and really give people a lot to think about. Just to remind everybody on the call, we will be sending out the copy of the recording and the copy of the slides. And you can also reshare those with any of your colleagues or peers who you think might likewise find it interesting. We love your feedback on today's webinar, so feel free to fill in the short survey that will appear on your screen shortly. You can email me, Lucy at atcevents.com.au. We'd also love to hear if you've got any particular topics or conversations that you really want to be having this year. Let us know. We will try and arrange something, get some experts online for you. Our next webinar is happening on Thursday, the 22nd of February, and we're going to be looking at a case study with LG Electronics around how they implemented AI tools in their recruitment process to streamline everything. So if you enjoyed the AI elements of the conversation today, make sure to tune into that. We'll include a registration link in the follow-up email. And we also have a lunch happening in Melbourne on Friday, the 23rd of February. So if you work with an organisation of more than 5,000 employees and are looking to have more conversations around streamlining processes, AI, future of the talent leader, move to talent advisory, please do join us. Let us know if you want to come along to that. It's at Supernormal, which we always a great time. And we'll include information around that in the follow-up email. So with that, I'd just like to say thank you again to Kevin. Thank you again to everyone for dialing in today and joining us. Thank you for being kind with us with those minor teething issues we experienced. And we look forward to seeing you again online next time.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks.
So, bye.